There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Millennial Think Tank. I am sure it's going to be a very exciting topic conversation tonight because we were talking about Uber, Lyft, and collaborative economies. We have a fairly packed panel, lots of opinions, and lots of ideas. So I'm just going to frame the discussion a little bit, not with statistics, but with some things I researched about what's going on with basically transportation, and just to describe a collaborative economy to anyone watching or listening who doesn't know what it is. Basically, it's a powerful movement that shifts power away from corporations. So it's transforming industries, and we're going to do a series of hangouts focusing on industries that are being transformed. Well-known examples, of course, are Uber and Lyft. I was looking at the VC money that Uber's raised, and it's $3.3 billion to this date, if I'm correct. $3.3 billion. So they're also, Uber's had a lot of PR maelstroms around them. Samantha's really dying to talk about that. But both Uber and Lyft have been the focus of lawsuits. Uber's being sued, and I know that Lyft was as well, in LA, a couple counties in California, Portland, Boston was working on a class action lawsuit for them exploiting their drivers. So there's a lot of attention being paid. And of course, if you've been paying attention internationally, Paris just banned, I'm blanking, but Uber's less expensive, I think Uber Pop, it's called, because their cab drivers pay $300,000, or that's what a cab license costs in Paris. So just something to think about as to why these new types of companies are disrupting well-established industries and getting a lot of press. Okay, so now I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves. We're going to start with Albert and tell us who you are, where you fall in the millennial spectrum, age-wise, and where you live and what you do.
Hi, my name is Albert. I am 27 years old on the millennial spectrum. I currently live in Silicon Valley, and I do product marketing for a high-tech company.
Okay, Joe?
Hey, my name's Joe Cardillo. I am 30, so I'm on the upper spectrum, end of the spectrum, millennials. I've worked for startups and legacy companies. I do a lot of product growth, operations, content, analytics. I've actually worked for a collaborative economy marketplace for designers and clients. So.
Okay, Kelsey?
Hi, I'm Kelsey. I'm 26, and I am a project manager for Palo Alto University.
Okay, and you're a younger, older millennial?
Oh,
younger millennial?
I'm sorry.
Just 20.
You
don't have to say your actual age if that's, I mean, you guys are so damn young, who cares, right?
26, no problem. I'm proud.
Okay, Kiernan, our baby, I think.
Oh, sorry. I'm Kiernan, and this is Rascal the dog. Yeah, we didn't.
This was last week, buddy.
Pardon?
I'm kidding.
The pet show was last week, he said. Okay, go, Kiernan.
Anyway, I'm 22, and I'm a third-year English student at Lehigh University and part-time barista.
Okay, and Paige?
Hi, I'm Paige Sandu. I'm 23, so pretty low on the spectrum. I live in San Francisco, and I'm a visual designer for IBM Social Business. It's my first big one hangout, or second one ever. Yay!
Great. You came to the crazy one, so good. Samantha?
Hi, my name is Samantha. I'm 24, so I'm a younger millennial, and I currently work in public interest research. And now I'm a published poet, too, so yay!
Wow. And I think you and Kieran have both had a birthday since we started. You're both getting old before my eyes. Yeah, I've talked about this before. I hope we do the show for many years so we can sort of follow everyone's changing opinions as they get older. Okay, so we're going to start with, I know a lot of people have a lot to say, so we're going to start with a few questions. I'd like to hear from all of you if it's possible. How many of you, just raise your hand if you've used Uber or Lyft. That'll just make it easier for me. So, Kiernan, I can't see your hand if you're raising it. You're the only, and Samantha, you've never used either? Okay, so everyone else has. Oh, by the way, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Amy Tobin. I look like a millennial, but I'm not one. I'm an older Gen Xer, and I am the VP of Content and Strategy for our company. All right, so for those of you who, I know I use that joke every week about looking like a millennial, but I like it. If you've used Uber or Lyft, I'd love to hear from how you differentiate between the two companies. Did you use one or the other out of convenience, or is there something about the brand positioning of each one of those in your mind? You know, Uber being sort of more upscale. Did that, Albert? I'm going to ask you, when do you use which and why?
Um, well, I use Uber really a lot, like because I had a bunch of credits from them. Apparently, a lot of my Facebook friends had joined Uber, so Uber gives you like a $10 or $15 credit when you do that. And so when I was back in New York City back in September, I used Uber a bunch of times just because I had like $60 worth of credits.
That you what, like one ride in New York?
No. That survived me like 6 or 7 rides.
Okay.
Yeah, because so it was just like, hey, why not? And so that's when I use Uber. And on my flight back from Orange County last Thursday, I also used an Uber. I am pretty impartial to Uber or Lyft. I feel like Lyft is the much more happy sounding company. They tend to be very, I think, cheerful in their marketing, whereas Uber, I think, brands themselves more as like kind of like, oh, you're gonna get it in an Uber, and it's like you're gonna feel like your own private car. Like you kind of have that upscale sense to it. Whether I choose one or the other, I mean, I think because Lyft feels cheaper because it is probably cheaper too. I would probably choose Lyft if I had a choice between Lyft or Uber, just basically going on cost, and
Okay.
that's kind of how I would see it at the end of the day.
All right, Paige, I want to ask you that question. So do you use both, right? Did you tell me you use them today?
Yeah, so back when Uber was in San Francisco, 2012, 2013, so I've been using Uber for about 2.5 years now, 2 years. I didn't really think that Lyft was actually going to be a good competitor until my friends started using Lyft instead of Uber. So I've been kind of sort of from 100% Uber to more like 50-50. Now I'm about 60-70% Lyft, 40-30% Uber.
And why did they start using Lyft? Why did your friends start using Lyft?
Well, there's some heavy biases. We started encountering some, okay, yeah, personal opinion. We started encountering some very terrible Uber drivers. Like we would be in the car and we'd see Uber drivers going through stop signs. They'd be taking turns too fast. So there were a lot of close encounters where we just got kind of concerned for our personal safety. And that was right when Lyft was starting to take off in San Francisco too. So my best friend switched from Uber to Lyft exclusively. And that was about a year ago, and I want to say, yeah, like basically your decision's kind of been affecting mine. It also depends on the situation. If I want to be someplace incredibly fast, I want to show up in a proper fashion, I use Uber. But if it's someplace that I want somebody that knows the back roads of San Francisco, I use Lyft. Just because it's people from San Francisco usually.
Okay.
So they know their way around the city. Whereas Uber drivers I've found they don't really know the city as well as Lyft drivers. They use their GPS and all, or they'll rely on you to give directions. So that's kind of my.
So what about the safety issues? Have you the rude drivers, bad driving, that kind of safety issue? Have you experienced any of that with Lyft? And have your friends?
I've experienced any negative ride, any bad experience with Lyft. Actually, I'm trying to think really hard right now.
Okay.
I don't think so. Yeah, no, it's always been Uber that's been, the sudden immediately stop, in the middle of the road, and then there's cars honking because they have to brake in order not to run into you. I've encountered people screaming at my Uber because he's just flying down the streets. So I don't know. Yeah, it started with a great service, and then I found the driver quality has gone down, and as the quality has gone down, my desire to take Lyft has gone up. So,
Aha. Yeah, I know. All I keep thinking with all of these stories is Lyft has a real opportunity. Joe, I want to hear your take on that as well. I had never actually heard the bad driving thing. That's the first time I heard that.
I don't really use either one a lot. I mean, I've used both a handful of times each, right? So and mostly it was just because I was curious to see what it would be like. But my friends use both, and so I've been in the cars a fair amount of time with people. And we'll get into that later probably, but part of the reason is I bike and walk almost everywhere, and I really like to drive in general. But I would actually say that's pretty consistent with experiences I've had in Denver, Albuquerque, New York with both Uber and Lyft. Is both how I think Albert characterized it as Uber is a sort of more sophisticated version in terms of the brand. Lyft is like friendlier, and as the culture seems to matter a lot more. And then in terms of the quality of the drivers, like I know people who use both a lot. I also know people who have driven for both, and they've said almost the same thing, like about the safety aspect and other drivers and the competition and the culture of it. So it's consistent.
So, okay, Kelsey, you want to weigh in since you've used them? You're muted. Unmute yourself. There
Sorry
you go.
about that. I actually use Lyft pretty much exclusively. I've taken Uber once, and I didn't think that it was a great experience. And I just use Lyft primarily only because my brother-in-law's girlfriend is a community manager at Lyft, and so I'm just I was using it in the early days, trying to support her and their efforts. And both my husband and I describe Lyft as a ride with a friend. So you get in, you drive, you ride in the front seat, you get to know that person, and I think millennials are searching for that personalized service. It's something that we're willing to pay for because we think that it really enhances our travel. We've decided to be a one-car family recently, and supplementing with Lyft because we can access it. And we are now so used to it that we landed in Portland two months ago, and we literally were stranded because we didn't know how to get around.
Because they have a lawsuit against which one of them?
Exactly. So we just love it. We like the culture, kind of like same sentiments at what everyone's talking about. I just haven't had a real personal feeling. What's the advantage between using Uber and a taxi other than you can hail it with your app? So that's why I'm just a Lyft fan.
Okay. Albert, please tell that story about the fist bump, because I'm. You're telling me that Lyft used to have their drivers do fist bumps with the.
Yeah. So you know how Lyft you can do the purple mustache. That's how you know it's a Lyft car. So that's the one way you do know. And so I think it's part of their branding that they want to be fun. They want to be really cool. And so when you get into a Lyft. According to their onboarding videos, they ask you to fist bump your passenger. And when you're actually in a Lyft as well, a lot of them also offer you food to eat, candy, things like that, just to give you a better overall experience. I remember when I was in Dallas in December of 2013, and we were going from I think the hotel to a holiday party. On the way back, rather, our driver offered us a couple of candies that he had in the back seat, and he had water as well, and so that's just part of the general experience. I've never been offered a bottle of water.
Okay.
In Uber.
This is when you can tell it's like fist bumping is not something that I do on a regular basis. It's just not something that I walk up to people. So if an older person is using, people my age fist bump, of course, but like I could picture some comedic moments when the driver's trying to do it and the passenger's like, what? Okay.
Well, they actually say, like, when you get out of the car, they're like, hey, yo, man, thanks for the ride. And they'll actually lean over and say, hey, can you fist up me goodbye? And then you fist bump. That was the actual, like, goodbye in most of my Lyft rides for a while. Yeah.
Wow. That just cracks me up. Okay, and you guys are in the chat, you guys are mentioning flywheel and sidecar, and okay. Wow. Okay. So how many of you own a car? Samantha owns a car, Albert owns a car, Kelsey, Joe, Paige, Karen, you're the only one without a car too? How the hell did you get around? No, I'm kidding. Lives on a college campus. He gets around on his feet. Okay. How many of you use Uber or Lyft to commute, or how do you commute? So who drives their car to commute? Not Samantha. Paige doesn't because she's in San Francisco, right? Kelsey, you do? Drive?
Yeah, I have to. I have to drive to a satellite lot, and then a van picks me up at a satellite lot to go to my workplace. So we're like out in the middle of nowhere. I wish we didn't have to. I would totally take Lyft line if I could, or any public transportation, but there's just nothing.
Okay, and Albert, you drive?
Yeah, so the only time I really use an Uber or a Lyft is like, say, if I didn't want to walk a long distance after getting off a subway in, say, San Francisco, or if I got out at the airport and I didn't have someone pick me up, I would take a Lyft or an Uber to wherever I needed to go, because I think it's generally cheaper than, say, doing long-term parking or taking a traditional taxi, or trying to get one of my friends to like come pick me up at that moment, which is
I think
very.
like traditional taxis though, depending on your company, can be better because like I do a co-op, and like since it's a co-op taxi, it's like $50 comparatively to like 65, 70. So.
All right. So tell us what a co-op taxi company is.
So there's a line of like chains here called co-op, and so like essentially those who work there, and you can buy. It's like a Sam's Club or a Costco. Like you buy a membership, and then you can get discounted prices if you're in there. But everyone can use co-op taxi, and it's much cheaper. So essentially, you know that the drivers are getting like a better salary. You know that they're unionized. You know that everyone's going to have like actual benefits at the end of the day. So I also use it because it's cheaper.
Sorry, I just had somebody calling in, so I'm just trying to squash that. Okay, so. Does anybody else use a co-op taxi? Like, do you know of their existence? Do they have them where you are?
This is the first time I've ever heard of that before. So if there's co-op taxis in San Francisco, I'd love to learn more about them. Definitely.
I've only seen it in Edmonton, so I don't know if it's anywhere else, but I love it here.
Sorry guys, doesn't usually happen when I get somebody calling me. When we're in the hangout. Okay, so if you're using Lyft, Uber, and those sort of things, mostly for not commuting, but things like getting home from the airport, long walks. But what about when you go out at night? Is that it? Is it like the replacement for a cab? Is that the primary use?
Definitely. At least for me, for hailing cabs in San Francisco, just knowing that Uber and Lyft is cheaper is always the biggest thing. But like when you're out in the city late at night, you don't want to be standing there waving your arm, wandering around the block to try and find a taxi. You want a ride to pick you up at that very spot, and you have a countdown to it. You can see where the car is coming from. So that's when my friends and I use it. Is primarily we're out and about, potentially after the bars and stuff.
Sorry. Not being as smooth as you, Samantha, because I'm getting pinged. Is it okay if I'm going to list the 3 top reasons? Convenience number 1, safety number 1. Okay, let's ask the women that first. I want to ask it by gender. Paige, the number 1 reason you're picking it, is it safety, convenience, or price, or anything else?
I'd say it'd be convenience with price a close second. Safety, I haven't really encountered any safety issues. I know we're probably going to talk about it later on.
No, I mean like what you just described is you don't want to be standing outside at night waving for a cab or wandering around.
I think it could probably depend on the situation. Like, let's say if it's 2 a.m., I'm by myself, it'd be safety. If it was 2 p.m., I'm surrounded by a group, tons of people, it might depend on convenience or price.
Yeah, okay.
Crime rate and stuff, so that's my answer, I guess.
And Kelsey?
Convenience.
Yeah,
Kelsey?
I would say safety. I'm pretty paranoid, so safety is number 1. And I'm with Paige. Like, price is definitely a close second. But like convenience, I mean, I fly and need to get somewhere. I need a ride at like 4 in the morning. But I also have to know that it's going to be safe, because I just am not willing to risk getting into a car with somebody I don't.
Do you feel that a cab is safer than an Uber or Lyft?
No. I've had
No.
just bad experiences with cabs. So.
Samantha, what about you?
Well,
Get your co-op cab, a regular yellow cab company.
If I'm going to use a cab company, at least in Canada, there's regulations based on like what happens with cabs, and like you have to do so many checks to be like approved to be a cabbie, and then you also like are guaranteed, like if you leave from the airport, they also keep track of things too, right? So I mean, I feel safer knowing that I can always report the cab driver, and it's going to go to both their own company, and I can also go to an external board that's measuring the like how well they do their job. which is completely different than like Uber, which is like, sorry, like.
Okay, and Paige, what about you? Because I didn't ask you about that aspect, about a traditional cab company. Do you feel it's safer, less safe?
I sometimes actually think that traditional taxis are safer just because they've gone through the proper training, they've gone through school. Like, well, my uncle was a taxi driver here in San Francisco for 15 years. I can ask him about any street corner. He'll be like, oh, yes, I know that street corner. I know the bagel shop. Like, my tallest movie in San Francisco is like, I know that exact corner. So I just like, I imagine taxis to be fairly safe just because they have the map of San Francisco, wherever they are, like in their head. Of course, if I get into the car and feel unsafe, I probably hop out the next block. But I guess you could say I'm kind of a trusting person. I don't know.
So what does he think of Uber?
What do I think of Uber?
No, what is your uncle, who's been the cab driver forever?
Oh, so he actually retired like 10 years ago. I mentioned it to my uncles, my aunts, my parents. I've faced tremendous backlash. My dad, mostly, you're a young girl by yourself, getting somebody's car, you know who they are. They might know where you're going. They know where you're going, like the end destination. So for him, safety is, big, bold letters for me. So yeah, they're really concerned, especially with all the, the cases against Uber as of late. What I tell them is don't knock until you try it. Of course, it can get sketchy at sometimes, but again, convenience is way too good.
Sure.
I guess I'd say, yeah, parents are so happy about it. They tell me not to use it ever. I use it just because I like the service, both Uber and Lyft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask the guys who've used it. Don't worry, Kieran. There's lots you can talk about in a second bit. But Albert or Joe, is safety ever an issue in your mind when you're getting into either regular cab or Uber or Lyft?
So as I was saying in the chat here, you can see the rating of your Uber or Lyft driver when they pick you up. I generally see that the driver that's picking me up has like 5 stars, and like I've never really had any accidents. I've never had any accidents or any safety issues. I feel like they use.
No, I mean your personal safety from a driver's creepy guy kind of thing.
No. It's funny because the only, I think, people have ever driven me in an Uber or a Lyft tend to be men. Although, I mean, I'll tell you this.
Well, what do you think? I didn't think you'd be worried about a woman attacking you, but hey.
But I do keep in mind that when I sit down in an Uber, I'm like, I wonder what it would be like if I were a woman getting in this Uber today.
Okay. All right. So you're cognizant of that. Okay.
I'm cognizant of the social issues. Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to switch to Joe because the next thing we're getting to is going to be big. But Joe, safety for you, and I'm sure you think about a woman. Yeah,
I mean, like I've had taxi rides, by the way, from people who I could barely tell if they knew the streets very well, which makes, and who knows if they were just borrowing the medallion from somebody. So that's always a little dicey. But I think I had one Uber ride that was a little dicey. Personal safety, it sucks, but it's true. Men don't have to worry about it. I haven't so far. So for me, the lineup is usually more like convenience, maybe price if it's a much longer ride, and then personal safety. But I'm definitely aware of how that safety aspect works.
Okay, Kieran, are you there? Because I really want to ask you this question.
Yeah, I'm here. My sister's here, and she keeps on haranguing me in the background. Okay, she was like, of all the times I wish I had a dildo.
Tell your sister that it's hard enough to keep you in line. I do not need her assistance getting you out of line. Yeah. Okay. So this is where we're going to get to brand ethics, because Kieran may not have used Uber, but I know he has an opinion on it. And so the real question is,
I've ever used transportation.
Let me ask the question. If it really is, do brand ethics matter in this situation? Do they ever trump any other thing? So Kieran, go.
I mean, I don't really care about brand ethics that much.
For Uber, well, what's the piece you're writing about Uber?
Oh, well, I was writing about something else. I mean, it's what I was writing about is that, to me, the primary function of marketing is to, sort of like appeal to this community of people who you assume are going to want this product. And I was writing about this sociology class that I took where we read this book by this guy, Benedict Anderson, called Imagine Communities. And he writes about the rise of nationalism in the country by virtue of the rise of print media, the spread of the vernacular language, and newspapers that brought people together under this sort of ideology that they were all part of that certain nationality.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right, and I'm saying that from a marketing sense, as the technology has expanded, these imagined communities have expanded too. For instance, well, everyone here who's American is American, even though we may not have met each other before, but we still identify that we are American. We're part of this
Except
imagined.
Samantha. She's not American.
Yeah, she's Canadian. Hey, well, we're all North Americans, right? Close enough. But I was talking about this point where we're getting where these imagined communities are actually becoming real communities.
Okay.
Because I consider the idea of Uber to be this sort of imagined community. All sorts of people use it all over the world. All right, but there's this strange point that we're getting to where actually on the ground it becomes a real community because you've got the ability to call these people up and they're right there, right in front of you.
Yeah,
And it's all about the consumers taking it upon themselves to interact with each other rather than the company interacting with them. And I was writing about how we're getting to this point where the trend is changing, whereas in the past marketers would try to sell a product or an idea or what have you to this sort of imagined community. Okay, where these people might not know each other, they might not interact with each other, but the company has this relationship with them. But we're at this point where we have more of a relationship with each other. Like people who write Amazon reviews, they're not doing it because Amazon is paying them. They're doing it because they genuinely are concerned about the other people who are using this Amazon product. And I'm saying that
making fun of the product. Yeah. So I love that concept of this imagined community becoming real right before your eyes when you're interacting with the real human being that was just a blip on the digital screen getting to you until they get there.
Yeah, and to me, that collaborative economy is the ultimate manifestation of that imagined community becoming real. And this community is becoming real even outside of the confines of what marketers might want, what governments might want.
Yeah, or what what corporations might want. And the one thing where I know you're really hitting on it is when we posted this, especially in Albert's group. Albert built his own community, which I'm going to write about on his job board, and it's very active, very engaged, and people were so passionate. Maybe it wasn't this discussion. It might have been the other time when people were saying negative things about Uber, and it was when they were getting a lot of backlash about some of the sexist things that the CEO has said, and people were so passionately defending it that it was kind of blowing my mind because I said, wait, because they're mostly all millennials. I said, isn't Gen Y the generation that's all about brand ethics and you care so much about what that company's about? And Albert said, because he's one of the most honest millennials I know, maybe if this was a traditional corporation that we didn't see as sort of part of us, we wouldn't be so passionate about it. Maybe we would hold it more accountable, right?
And when you get mad at an Uber driver, you're not getting mad at the company. You're getting mad at that relationship you're having in that local community. And it's not to the point where we are deluded enough to think that, hey, I didn't like that product, it's all Amazon's fault, they're ruining everything. We think, well, I wish other people who bought this would have told me what a piece of crap it was, or I wish that driver wasn't a total jerk.
So you want the community to rate him. You're not even thinking the company's responsibility is to tell you. It's the other Uber passengers who rate him should have damn well given him a bad rating. So, okay, very cool. Does anybody else want to speak to that? Because that sort of took a turn I wasn't expecting, but I think that's right on the money. Joe?
So your question is about brand ethics?
No, wait, but I want to see because Kieran took it in a different way.
Yeah,
Joe,
I can rephrase this.
No, I don't want you to rephrase it because I like it. Joe is making all sorts of faces like he's thinking.
Yeah, well, let me make it a clear question. I'm saying in economies, all right, is it the fault of the overarching institution, the organization, the corporation, or is it the fault of the local people on the ground? Who do you expect to have their act together?
When it's you mean when it's a collaborative economy like an Uber
Yes.
or a Lyft?
Yeah,
Okay.
when it's a
Okay.
collaborative
So
economy, is it? Yeah.
Joe, you're muted. Go.
Nicely done, Kieran, because you just summed up what I think is probably one of the primary problems for a collaborative economy company. And so I've worked for one, right? I worked for Visually, which was a design marketplace connecting designers and clients. And I think like probably there are a couple of answers. And one of them is if stuff gets really screwed up, you kind of don't care if it's the individual driver, designer, contractor's fault. You just kind of want the thing to work well, right? Or you want to be safe. And so, maybe Sam would say, like, or somebody else who's riding is like, yeah, I don't really care if I can rate somebody if my personal safety is not assured. Like, if a company can't assure my personal safety, I could care less about the ratings. And I say that having watched that happen. So that lives, I think, there on the one hand. And then on the other hand, and I'll try to speak from personal experience, like, I think we want to try and hold people accountable for doing good work or bad work, and so it's this like kind of quintessential human problem. But I think, and to go back to the very beginning, where we were talking a little more fuzzy terms about Uber versus Lyft, which seems friendlier, like that comes from very deliberate operations on the part of a company or the lack thereof, and that does mean something. That's my opinion.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that specific thing before we get into brand ethics? Because that took a turn. Okay, Samantha.
So, I mean, if you're looking at collaborative economies, and specifically on collaborative economies, it also matters if they're doing a non-hierarchical system or a hierarchical system too, right? So if it's a hierarchical system, you can rate the people who are part of it and have issues with it, but in a hierarchical system, the board or the executive director or whoever part of that economy still is responsible for the entire operations of the thing. So, I mean, like, this isn't a collaborative economy, but since you put it in the chat, I'm going to talk about it. If I go to a Sephora store and one of the makeup artists is really rude to me, I will label them and I'll be like, to the Sephora company, what are you going to do about these lower people? Because I had an issue with them, not you. And then if the company does not rectify what I experienced, same in a collaborative economy, then I will put blame onto the higher levels for not dealing with the way of their operations.
Okay. Question, because there's another layer here, because we know a lot about what Samantha has sort of a community of other Sephora passionate people who talk to each other about employees and product. So do you ever do what Kieran was just saying, like with an Amazon situation, but even Uber, do you ever blame the community for not giving you recommendations on said employee,
yes.
Product, blah, blah, blah?
So I'll give an example. So if you're a VIB Rouge, which means you spend a lot of money and you're the highest level, like I am, and it's not, okay, whatever. They do these like events where they like, you're a Rouge, so we're gonna celebrate you and blah blah blah, right? And, like, it's
you look. Go ahead.
And there in Edmonton, there's 3 stores. So often what will happen in the community is like people who are new to the area will be like, which of these 3 stores should I go to for the best experience? And it's kind of our job for those who have lived here to be like, this is the best one, this is the worst one, this is like the smallest lines. Like, it's kind of our job to navigate that for everyone else. And if we don't, then you often, like, if someone recommends a wrong store, you'll see that in the boards, like straight out like call-outs being like, you told me to go to the wrong store, I had an awful experience.
Okay.
So, like,
all right, so Joe, I really want to talk about that at some point, like the community's responsibility, not in this hangout because I know we're veering off topic, but I think that's pretty amazing that basically the other consumers owe you reviews, etc. Okay, all right, we're going to get back to brand ethics because in relation to these specific collaborative economies we're talking about, do brand ethics matter? I mean, Paige, you talked about why you started using Lyft more, and it had a lot more to do with your real-life experience, right? Safety and bad drivers, good drivers. I'm going to ask you first. Does the brand ethics, all the other PR issues that are swirling around Uber, did that impact it too, or was it mostly just the other things you described?
Initially, it was because of my personal experiences, and then with all the news in the past, I'm going to say like 2 months with Uber, that actually has influenced my decision. I'm not gonna lie. It's not because I consider my safety here in San Francisco to be affected, but just because of their practices in other countries, like in India and such. I just don't. I don't agree with that. So it has had an effect. Not due to my safety, but my concern for other people and for the company's ethics overall. Yeah.
Okay. And Albert, how about you on that, the brand ethics question?
Wow, that's a hard one. I think when I think of Uber or Lyft in relation to brand ethics, yeah, I think it's like I've seen that, people have died based on, what Uber drivers have done. I think I also think of my own wallet in those situations where it's like, okay, right, I can, I can pay double for a traditional taxi, or I'll probably just, go to Lyft instead, and use something that's, a little bit cheaper or whatever is convenient and currently installed on my phone to kind of make that happen. I don't think that at the end of the day I'm an unethical guy. I don't like to think that, maybe.
You said, I don't think I'm an unethical guy. Right?
Yes. Yeah, where it's like, I know in the general conversation, right, where you have this association with, oh, if you buy something from somebody, you support everything else that they do, or you support what their companies do. And at the end of the day, I feel like you can't really get away with that, get away from any company of that sort, right? Because IBM, for example, supported the Nazis, but that was like 100 years ago.
Poor Paige. Paige, we're not blaming you.
Hitler went around in a Mercedes-Benz, right? And so can you really?
Hugo Boss.
Huh?
Hugo Boss.
Hugo Boss.
Hugo Boss.
Well, we could go on, yeah, but I wanted to stick with brand ethics on collaborative economies and the
right.
we're talking about now. Yeah.
And so I think if it gets worse for Uber, yeah, I'll consider spending my money elsewhere. I also like to think that, Paige and I both have a friend from college who works as a payment analyst. Actually, Armand's roommate works as a payments analyst at Uber. And I'd like to think that, if I'm calling for an Uber, I'm also helping pay for the guy's salary. So,
but that's a very Silicon Valley sort of touch point there. That's not what somebody.
And also, right, each driver has an individual story. Like a couple of weeks ago, I took an Uber for a guy who worked like part-time for the county, and he was taking an Uber because he was going to get married to his fiance, and I was helping him pay for his ring. I mean, that just felt like a really nice, feel-good story. And
it's interesting. I think you talk to Uber drivers more than you talk to cab drivers. That's my experience. Joe, did you want to weigh in on the brand ethics thing, or Kelsey, both of you, either of you?
Yeah, I mean,
real quick though, you talk to Uber drivers more because Uber drivers speak English. Cab drivers don't.
Wow. Okay. Kieran, wait, because I want to hear from Joe on the brand ethics thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does matter, and I think I think part of it is whether you're talking about, like, when you talk about value, right, which is what I think we're sort of getting into. What's the value of the experience? And I think a lot about, like, what's the baseline foundation? What do I need to make sure that this experience is at least decent? It doesn't have to be amazing, right? Whether I'm taking a cab or I'm buying fresh vegetables or whatever, I don't expect it to be 100% perfect all the time, and I very rarely see people that do. But like, the actual value of it has to be consistent over the long term. And if someone's safety is threatened, or you're buying vegetables or some product and there's some insane toxin in it, like, that's not acceptable. And you could really care less whose fault that is. So the brand ethics, when it comes to, like, basic safety, I think that really shows, and I think it's really important. And I think Uber's paying for not caring about that or not paying attention to it.
Okay, you think they are paying, and we'll see. Like you always say, Joe, over time you find out. Kelsey, do you care about the brand ethic part of Lyft versus Uber, or any other options you have?
I do. And the reason is, at like a very young age, I really believed in the vote with your money sort of approach to buying, and anything I buy, anything I...
No, but not anything. I'm talking about in this collaborative economy thing, because I know you care about brand ethics overall.
Exactly. So, like, the brand ethics really comes into play when I am looking for a ride or transportation, because, let's say we're moving forward and we start thinking about self-driving cars. well, how are those self-driving cars made? How have they been produced? How has Google researched them? That's definitely something that's being taken into effect. How much emissions do they have?
Sure.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's definitely a really big deal to me, and that's
Okay.
the reason why I only use Lyft too. Is just for the brand ethics thing. I've just learned a lot of kind of dirty tricks that Uber's done. But again, I only have like the Lyft side of it because I'm super connected to Lyft like on the inside. So I definitely know there's two sides of the story. So I try and keep that in mind. But Lyft has just always been top of mind for me.
All right, and we're gonna shift a little bit. And Joe, I might want you to ask some questions around this sharing space. Especially for those of you who live in a city. And Tiffany couldn't be here tonight, but one of Tiffany's challenges, she lives in Austin, where public transportation is not plentiful, and she really prefers to be in her own space commuting to work. And she has to, but she also likes it because it's safe and it's her own personal environment. So. Joe, do you want to sort of phrase the space question? Because I'm assuming a lot of you have to take subways or buses or airplanes. And, Joe, I think you'd probably phrase the question better than me, unless you want me to just wing it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the basic version of it is, because we probably do share, we do collaborative economy things all the time that we don't necessarily think of. Like we collaborate in going to the grocery store and sharing the space there to buy products and stuff like that. And it looks a little bit different, but some of the aspects are there. So I think one of the basic questions is like, how do you feel about things where there is that shared experience, right? Like whether that's taking the train, the subway, whether that's going to a library, borrowing books. Those are all I think smaller examples of that kind of thing. Like to me, those things seem really sort of built in, but I don't know. I would wonder if people feel like you live a more separate life and you don't necessarily have those experiences, or do you value them? Do you care about going to the farmer's market and sharing that experience?
To me, it's like in transportation, though, because I wanted to see it like, okay, here's an example. What if you could take an Uber, and it would be even cheaper because two people were taking it together, headed in generally the right direction? Joe, does that make sense? Because I'm thinking of it as a transportation, collaborative economy kind of way. Because it is what we do in airplanes, right? Because Joe brought that up to me in a different chat. Like, you're getting a cheaper flight because you're not sitting alone on the airplane. Although maybe I threw it off by adding that, Joe.
Well, maybe this is I don't know if anyone else deals with this, but I have anxiety, right? So I often am dealing with claustrophobia. I'm often dealing with I need to sit on windows, so things like that. If I'm going to take light rail transit, I'm looking for the nearest open seat that is looking outside. And I come up with all of these little safety measures essentially to make sure I feel as comfortable as possible. If Uber, if I was ever going to take a taxi and it's oh, we're going to pick up two other people, I'd be no, I've chosen a taxi for a reason. I know it's just me and whoever I am taking to the same place. There are often times too where I drive because that's just the kind of day it is. That's a day where I know that I need space. And I know that it's being on, if it's one of those really busy public transit days, I know I'm not going to do that. I think that's also we're also in a time frame where more people are in tune if they have anxiety issues. So we also get into that sort of thing too.
So Paige and Albert, do you guys take BART?
Yeah, I take BART.
And is that a not so great mode of transportation compared to if you could afford to take Uber, you would take it instead?
They're always going on strike.
They're always going on strike.
I think BART is a very incomplete service. Because you live in the South Bay where there's transportation to nothing, and Kelsey knows this. If you want to get anywhere up to where things seem to matter, it's the Caltrain, and the Caltrain really sucks when it comes to the fact that it takes you literally 2 hours to make a 45 to go the equivalent of what's 45 minutes in a drive. As far as BART is concerned, if I'm going into downtown San Francisco and where I need to go is 3 to 5 blocks from a station, oh yeah, it works great. But if I'm going into downtown San Francisco and I need to be in the Marina District, like holy shit, I'm taking. Oh, excuse me, sorry.
That's all
I'm
right.
I'm getting off the BART, and then I probably also have to. I probably also have to take an Uber as well, just so that I'm not walking the next 5 miles.
So it's all convenience. Okay, what if you're
Yeah.
in London? London has one of the best subway station systems in the world. It's more convenient than driving anywhere in London. So, but in London, you're on a tube with lots of other people. Do you ever, is it
Well, Amy, it's
What?
also impossible to drive in London. It's impossible to drive there.
And it's so horribly expensive to drive in London when you include the city tax as well. Once you enter like the London lines, yeah, no.
But New York is very similar. I mean, the subway in New York might not be as clean and safe because it's New York and not London, but it's a lot cheaper to take the subway in New York than it is to drive or take a cab or whatever. So is there a benefit, like, because I'm thinking about, when I'm thinking about space, I'm thinking about there are other people that you do not know. Like, I lived in Boston forever. Everybody takes the T. Far more convenient. You can't park in Boston. You just get used to sitting down with a stranger and touching them when there's demand spread, you know? Like, that's what I'm thinking of is for space and what you give up and what you get out of that interaction with strangers when you're commuting. What?
I want to say something because I just got back from a round-trip flight. I was in Las Vegas, and I took this really cheap airline. It was like the cheapest, most
What was it
budget
called?
airline. Spirit Airlines. I had a round-trip flight to Vegas. It was $109, okay? And I'll tell you what, you can go on there and you can control your own frills. If you want an exit row seat, you better fork out $25. You want a bag, you better pay all the money, all right? And I'll tell you what, this is how you know whether or not a person really cares about that space. Will you spend $25 on an exit row seat when you have the option? Or will you just abide sitting on top of two Hasidic, rabbis talking back and forth all the time?
Rabbi.
Or you can do what I did, and I just brought some Reese's, and I bribed the flight attendant, and I got an exit row anyway.
So, okay, that's what I was going to ask you, because Kieran is a big guy. He's really tall. He's a big guy. Would you pay the $25 if you didn't have the bribing? Is it worth it to have that extra space?
Damn right.
Okay, yeah. So that's really interesting. So do you think it's cool that you can pay for your frills as you go?
Yeah, I love that airline. It is so ghetto. The seats don't even recline back. Okay? It is so perfect. Like, you only pay for what you want. It's like sitting on a bus, and I love it. It is completely bare bones, no frills, and that's how it all should be.
Okay, so let me say this then. Sitting on a bus is pretty damn no frills and really inexpensive, right? Who takes a bus in public transportation because it's inexpensive? Kieran, okay.
You know how I got to the airport? All right? I had to take the bus, then I took the light rail, then I flew, then I took a shuttle, then I took another light rail, and then I took the Amtrak.
They should have made a movie about it. And Paige, I promised you a Kieran moment, right? And there it was. So, okay, so Paige, when do you take the bus?
I take the bus whenever I want to go to work in downtown, just because it's incredibly convenient. Yes, our buses are late, 5 minutes every single time. They're never on time, but they're there. One of the two biggest bus lines is right outside my apartment, and it takes me straight to downtown in 20-25 minutes, even during rush hour. So that's when I usually use the bus, or to get to Caltrain, and I take Caltrain back home to my parents' place in Palo Alto.
So all of this is more convenient than driving a car.
Oh, yeah, I've gone in too many parking tickets to justify not taking the bus. No.
Okay. All right. Okay. I want to shift to, goodness, we only have 10 minutes left. Google Car. I mean, Kelsey touched on it because what was interesting is when Kelsey was coming, we were talking about her coming to this hangout or not. You lease a car now, right, Kelsey?
Yep, we leased one.
Lease one car, rely on collaborative traveling. Other than that, right? You gave up a car so that you have one car and you're doing Lyft a lot and fist bumping all the time. She said, in 3 years, tell me what your husband said. In 3 years, we think we'll be not leasing a car. We'll be.
My husband's here, so he's laughing at me. Yeah, he thinks in 3 years, when the lease is up, Google will come to our home with a self-driving car, and we will no longer need a lease because Google. I see him on my way to work,
That's what I want.
And and he literally thinks this, and that we will not have to drive anymore. We will just summon the Google car.
Oh, so you summon it. You're not going to own a Google car. It's just going to be like an Uber without a driver. It's going to be just, okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and that's what you want. And how much would your husband pay for that ability? Would it be 10 times what an Uber is? Or Lyft or whatever?
I think he'd pay the equivalent of like a lease, which I think like what the average lease is like $200 or $250 or something, like a membership. You know, wouldn't a Google car like if we're thinking out of the box, like if a Google car service, you would probably pay a membership fee, or maybe you would pay per mile.
I know you guys would pay a lot since you buy your cats distilled water and all sorts of other things. Exactly. But that was last week's hangout. So does anybody else have feelings about Google Car and how that could transform the way they transport or they commute, drive around, get around?
Well, I'm not sure about Google Cars, but I'm pretty sure about these Amazon drones. I think they're going to be picking up at your doorstep.
You're going to need a big-ass drone.
Drop us off wherever we need to go.
I can't wait.
Kieran will need a giant drone. This will be like a B-52 coming in. That is hysterical. Although we should do something about drones at some point. Okay, Joe, we only have like 9 minutes, but get to the Elon Musk.
Hyperloops. Is that where we're going?
Yeah, that's where we're going. Yay. Nice job, Albert. No, I mean, because, look, like, some of what we're talking about is sort of like, a lot of the pain in the butt of having, your various sort of like, how do I summon a car via Uber? Well, hey, man, like, and most people who are familiar with the money that Google has invested into, car sharing and stuff like that, know that they're making a much larger long-term bet, right? And so, like, the Hyperloop would be an example of a much longer-term bet. It'll probably be 10 to 15 years before that even shows up. But it's like, if you think about the ideal, like, would something like the Hyperloop where you can sit in a little capsule, maybe by yourself, maybe with 4 or 5 other people, and get somewhere, halfway across the country in just a couple, 3 hours, would that be more attractive? I mean, I wonder about that. So.
Okay. So who wants to jump in on that? Paige, you really don't want to talk about it?
I haven't really done too much research on it personally. I think it's a fantastic idea, especially with the how much it costs versus how much it'll save for transportation. I approve the bullet train from San Francisco to LA, which I know is a very low amount of people approve it or like it. So
why do you approve it and why do they not like it? Why is it unpopular?
Well, for my parents, it's the fact that they'll have to reclaim land in order to lay down the tracks. That's what my parents have been saying. Especially if you're here in San Francisco or Palo Alto, in order to build the trains, they'll have to buy homes. It's something along those lines.
All that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I am also
against the idea of that as well.
Okay, but so I don't want to get off the Elon Musk thing because the reason I went to Paige is when Joe was talking, she said she's a total fangirl, and what I like to tap into is where does that passion come from? Because there's obviously passion for Uber-like services, right? So when Elon Musk comes up and Joe starts talking about where does the fangirl aspect of it come? What's the most exciting part? Because fangirl is a heck of a lot stronger than, hey, yeah, I like that, I might check it out,
I think the fangirl aspect comes from the fact that this is something from our dreams. It's in the futuristic movies, these Hyperloop type of transportation. So the fact that Elon Musk can actually potentially make this happen, well, he himself won't actually make it happen. He says that he hates the fact that he's mentioned it. He does not want to be the one to do it. In fact, I think another company is going to pick it up. So I like the idea. I like how he's actually pushing people to come up with to actually pick up this project, making it like a reality instead of just something we've seen in the movies for all these years. So that's a fangirl aspect. I don't know how it will happen, but I hope that it happens during my lifetime.
Okay. Does anybody else want to talk about it?
I just like what Elon Musk has done with Tesla, but that's, I guess, it.
Yeah, I almost had an accident because I'm almost certain I saw Sergey on his elliptical machine in Palo Alto. I am obsessed with him. And like if Sergey was like, Kelsey, we need you to test our Google cars, I'd be like, absolutely, Sergey, what do you need me to do? And I think there's definitely like a fan aspect like in Silicon Valley because it's kind of like a cult culture sort of thing because it's like new technology, you want to be on the the forefront of it and the first users and I think there's definitely like that culture, but is it unique to Silicon Valley or is it unique to the
That is what I want to know. Is it unique to millennials when they're when something is of them or they feel like it's new and coming of age in their sort of, I don't know. Samantha, you speak to that then. Like, so you're not in Silicon Valley. You're about as far from Silicon Valley as you can get in North America, at least.
I'm like 31 hours driving away from Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
She's made the calculation.
So you have a fangirl thing for Sephora, right, and other companies and brands. So with Elon Musk, with Tesla, with Google Car, because I don't know if it is Silicon Valley or not. That's what I'm trying to see.
I think I also operate in a lot of online spheres, right? And like fangirling is totally something that I see all the time. Fanboy, fangirl all the time. It doesn't matter what it is. And like also in a lot of academic circles, which I also fall under as like someone who's a graduate student, like often someone will be like, I'm reading Foucault and that's all I love and I'm the biggest fan, and like there are people who like study only one person and like that's all they do. And like I've seen that. Like I definitely.
But it's not celebrities. It's more like thought leaders, technology. I'm asking. Sorry,
it's all over the place. Like I find that it can be like I know people online who are like Benedict Cumberbatch is like the best thing since sliced bread, and like that's it. That's it for them.
Okay,
but
whole other idea for a whole other topic because there's a lot written about millennials that they don't buy into the cult of celebrity, and I don't know if I buy that. It might be just different kinds of celebrity.
It's different kinds.
Benedict Cumberbatch is different though.
Okay, all right. Well, we're not going to talk about him because this is what we're going to do for the next 3 minutes. I want to do what we were doing before we got on air, which you were late for, Karen and Shocker. I want to talk about collaborative economies that you guys are interested in. Airbnb. Kelsey, you have got to tell us, what was that one? Airbnb? Please just briefly describe this.
Find a clean restroom. Yes.
In someone's house.
In someone's house.
So it's like Uber, except you can say, I have to pee, I'm on the corner of 36th and whatever, and go into someone's home and use their toilet, right? And what do you pay for that?
I think it starts at $3, right? I don't think it's not. I would do it. I would totally do it.
Okay, do you have a time limit? Because in Paris, it used to be that when you paid to use the public toilet thing, you only got so many minutes, so I could never, ever do it because I'm like, this thing's going to open, right? Because you pay on the outside. Anyway, so that was a long time ago. So okay, let's skip that. But what other collaborative economies, and Joe, just jump in, or anyone else, or would you like to have us explore? Albert?
Boatbound, Breeze. So Breeze is one where basically they, I think, let you lease or they lend you like a Prius, and you can do everything from TaskRabbit to your Lyft Uber sidecar to whatever other errands you need to run. And essentially, if you don't have a car, they give you that car. I think it'd be cool to think about, I guess. The collaborative economies where you can rent a jet, right? So if you feel like you want to fly, 30 of your friends privately down to like Vegas, right? And you have $20,000 between the 30 of you to burn, right? That might be an interesting idea.
Okay.
I think
what, Joe?
I was just going to say, I think things like mentorship, training, and coaching, in addition to like physical products, goods, and services.
Okay.
There's a couple really awesome cafes out of Montreal that are called Hive, and they're all collaborative and they're awesome.
Okay,
Karen, how about collaborative workspaces?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? Jason Konopinski has one that he's part of, an owner of, and he's a friend of ours.
Kelsey's talking about Odesk, Thumbtack. We have a WeWork.
Let me just ask a question. Stop. Kieran, so Kieran's on a college campus, an actually really great university. Are these things talked about? Because he's in a rural setting, though. So even though he's in a
It's not rural. It's urban.
Lehigh,
Bethlehem. It's a city.
I thought Lehigh was okay. I'm thinking of Bucknell, but anyway, sorry. So are
Yeah,
these things
that's in
talked
the
about?
movie.
Are these things talked about on campus? All of these sort of collaborative.
All we ever talk about is when are they going to build an escalator? Because campus, it's on this really steep hillside. It's like San Francisco. And the big joke is the guy who invented the escalator was a Lehigh graduate. And we're like, well, of course he invented the escalator. Try walking up this hill all day.
Okay.
We always talk about when are they building our escalator. Or our
Okay.
That's all we want.
I just went, all right. So it's 9 o'clock, and we've got a lot in there. Next week, we are going to continue. We're going to go off schedule, and we're going to continue on collaborative economies and dig into some of those companies and industries. Because what we're really interested, too, is what's happening when these collaborative economies are transforming traditional industries. And, I think the lawsuits against Uber, some of them are founded on class action principles like customer or driver safety, but there's a lot that's I think probably being pushed from corporate giants that are okay.
The whole other side of it is the working conditions, which I'm sure we're going to dig into.
Yeah, so we'll go. We're going to have a phase 2 of this next week because I just think there's so much to talk about. I'm going to go off air. You guys can hang out and we can talk a little bit or stop the live broadcast. And thanks everybody who watched.